It's important we look at the facts. Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.
Hi, I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record. Thanks for joining us in the first edition of Planet Holyrood, our weekly look at everything that's going on in Scottish politics. I'm joined by two esteemed guests, Ben Borland, the editor of the Scottish Daily Express, and also Hannah Rodger, the chief reporter of the Sunday Mail. Now, there's a lot been going on at Holyrood this week, but there's only one story in town, and that, of course, is the SNP leadership contest, which at the present moment is between Health Secretary Humza Yousaf, Finance Secretary Kate Forbes, and backbencher Ash Regan. And I think it'd be fair to say that over the last few days, Kate Forbes' campaign has crashed and burned over her opposition to same-sex marriage and comments on people having children outside wedlock. So just starting with you, Hannah, just how catastrophic have the last few days been for Kate Forbes' campaign?
Yeah, I think they've been pretty damaging, not just for her campaign, but I think for the SNP in general, and for her potentially, her future job prospects in the SNP. It's almost as if people feel like they can't go near her in some way because she's perceived as having these sort of quite extreme views. I did notice this afternoon that she appears to have tried to relaunch her campaign on social media, where she's talking about, this contest is about independence, and I'm very sorry for the hurt that I may have caused anyone with my, views. So she is trying. I hear that there's going to be some sort of video, I think, later today as well from Kate Forbes, again, trying to sort of reposition herself and relaunch the disaster that's been her campaign so far. But I think it's going to be quite hard for people to completely forget about the things that she said or even look past them.
Just on that, Hannah, I mean, she started off by hurting people in same-sex relationships, effectively saying that their relationships were not equal to people in mixed-sex relationships. And then she also said what she said on children out of wedlock. Is it recoverable for her, do you think? Or do you think that her campaign is dead in the water?
I mean, I think she's offended an awful lot of people, not only, as you say, a lot of gay people who are married, but also, I suppose in modern Scotland, there are a lot of people these days who have children who are not married, and a lot of them will be SNP members. And I think it's probably going to be pretty hard for her to kind of recover from that. I mean, certainly, I don't know if it's going to be possible for her to recover enough to get enough backing to win the contest.
Ben, I mean, she's sort of couched it in terms of she's being attacked for her private faith, that these matters are personal. She doesn't want to change the law on gay marriage, abortion. I mean, what do you make of that argument?
I think that's quite a good argument. It's certainly been the case that Kate Forbes has never hidden these views. I don't think any of her party colleagues or her cabinet colleagues can say that they weren't aware that she held these views. She's been very open. I think everyone in Scotland knows what the Free Church is and what it stands for. And I think anyone who follows Scottish politics has been aware that Kate Forbes was a devout Christian, and she held these beliefs on equal marriage rights and the sanctity of marriage. So for people to back her campaign and then suddenly desert her in such extraordinary fashion, did seem like an attack. It did seem as though there was some dishonesty at work, because there's no way that the people who initially backed Kate can have been unaware that she held these views.
Well, maybe they thought that she was a bit softer on these issues than the reality. She was probably, they should have carried out due diligence. But in terms of the wider point, is it not very difficult for a social conservative to lead what is essentially a centre-left, socially liberal party?
I mean, it certainly is. We've had a number of letters and emails into the paper from people who are Conservative supporters saying that they like Kate Forbes, they like her message, they like her honesty. There was a Radio Scotland phone-in I listened to yesterday where there was at least one caller said, I'm a Conservative voter, but I like Kate Forbes and I'd consider voting for her in the future. So that message has certainly resonated with a section of the Conservative support in Scotland. I'm not sure that's what she intended, but that certainly seems to have been one of the impacts of it. And I'm not so sure that her campaign is dead in the water. I think SNP members, it's a bit like in the Tory leadership race. There's 104,000 SNP members, and we really know very little about who they are. What is their makeup? They're probably a little bit older. They may be more concentrated in the Highlands and Islands and the Northeast. Perhaps many of them are Free Church members. And I really don't know if the SNP membership is going to find these views quite as shocking as some of Kate's colleagues and some of the commentators and the people who've kind of been so taken aback by her views this week. I think she's still in the race.
Hannah, one thing we've learned in recent years is that it's very difficult to lead your political party if you don't have the support of your parliamentary group. So if you think about Jeremy Corbyn and then Liz Truss, now what we've seen over the last few days is a lot of people flocked to the campaign of Humza Yousaf, and a handful of folk who initially backed Kate Forbes retracting their support. So what do you think it would be like for Kate if she was actually to win this contest and then look around at her group and only see maybe 4 or 5 people who actually voted for her?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get to that in a minute, right? But one of the things I wanted to pick up on when Ben was saying, it seems a bit unfair that people who supported her have then suddenly changed their mind. I think that's not entirely accurate, because I think, yes, people must have known that she had certain views on gay marriage and things like that. But I think the way that she has said what she said is a big part of the sort of backlash of this. I don't know how she really would have got across her views without saying it in the way that she did. But I think there was a belief that somehow she would have some magic turn of phrase that would excuse her sort of beliefs and make them acceptable, which clearly they weren't. But yeah, in terms of your question, Paul, I think, if Kate Forbes was to win the contest and she was governing a party where the parliamentarians didn't vote for her, I think it would be a disaster. I think we would probably see another leadership contest very quickly afterwards, because as you've rightly said, we've had this situation before. Liz Truss, I guess Theresa May was also a bit of a victim to that in the end, and it just creates absolute havoc and chaos, and really only seeks to benefit the opposition parties, really, and it does really damage, as we've seen, it does really damage parties in the polls. So, I don't think if Kate Forbes was to take over and no one was supporting her, I just don't really see that lasting. It's not kind of sustainable for her.
Anna, a few days ago, Humza was 12-1 to be the next First Minister. Now he's the bookie's favourite, with Kate Forbes actually behind Ash Regan in the odds.
I wish I'd put a tenner on him, Paul.
Indeed, indeed. Now, obviously, Humza's had quite a difficult tenure as Health Secretary. It's a very tough job. He's not had many decent headlines. Anna, what do you make of the prospect of First Minister Yousaf?
Well, I think a few things, right? So we've got Kate Forbes, who was kind of parachuted in, I guess, to her current brief because of the, how to say it delicately, the inappropriate behaviour of Derek Mackay. And then you've got Ash Regan, who hasn't really had a huge breadth of experience. And then you've got Humza, who, yeah, okay, he's had these quite high profile jobs. So he's had justice, he's had transport, and he's got the NHS health. My view is anyone in those positions, you know, they're always going to get a hard time, and they're really, really hard briefs to make successful. There's always going to be problems with the NHS. There's always going to be like some scandal in the justice system. So I feel like it's a bit of an easy thing to poke fun at with Humza, that, oh, look, you've had all these jobs and you've not done any of them very well, so how can you govern the country? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, what I am waiting for is if he does become First Minister, the first time there's a problem, you know, there's going to be that photograph of him falling off that bloody scooter in Holyrood, splashed all over the place. Yeah.
Ben, how do you think Daily Express readers would react to Humza Yousaf in Butte House?
I think Daily Express readers will be terrified at the prospect of Humza Yousaf in Butte House. I mean, his record is... I take your point, Hannah. He's had tough jobs, but other people have had the health brief. Other people have had the justice brief and arguably made a much better fist of it. I don't want to seem as though I'm getting my lines from the Scottish Conservatives, but Douglas Ross said during First Minister's questions today that Humza Yousaf's being promoted upwards, and that does seem to be the case. I mean, as you say, Paul, he was 12-1. He was an outsider in the bookies' minds as the next First Minister. And for one reason or another, he's found himself propelled into the kind of First Minister in waiting, if you like. Angus Robertson was supposed to be being kind of prepared for the job, but then apparently all that preparation has come to naught. Kate Forbes was seen as a contender, and as we've seen, that her views on religious and social issues are going to make that very difficult for that to happen. Some people suggest that actually Neil Gray would have been a better option than Humza Yousaf. He's seen as perhaps a more capable pair of hands, but Humza's put the time in. He's been in office for over a decade now, in various ministerial posts. He's arguably the best known figure in the SNP outside Nicola Sturgeon, so I can see why they have gone for him. But I think Express readers will have mixed views. That they'll think that they'll be worried for the future of the country. But on the other hand, I think a First Minister, Humza Yousaf, will make the election of someone other than the SNP at the next Scottish Parliament election an almost certainty, because I just
picking up on the health brief there, Ben. I mean, how much? Obviously, the statistics are horrific on A&E and the backlog. How much is that personally down to Humza, and how much is actually a legacy of COVID?
I think it's probably a combination of the two. But then every country in the world is dealing with the fallout from COVID. The the UK as a whole is dealing from the fallout from COVID, and his recovery plan hasn't been well received by not just by the opposition parties, but by the health unions, the BMA.
Is it? I suppose the recovery plan's been welcomed. It's just the fact that they're not hitting the targets.
They're not hitting the targets. So I think what Humza is often described as being kind of quite a nice guy, but just a bit lightweight. This is a massive job. Getting the NHS through the post-pandemic period is arguably as big a job as you could have. And he just hasn't ever seemed like he's fully focused. It seems as though he perhaps takes the job a little bit lightly. We've not heard any great radical ideas. That there was the BBC Scotland story at the end of last year where NHS leaders in Scotland are starting to talk about charging people at the point of use. And that's an interesting idea. That's something that perhaps we should be thinking about. But Humza Yousaf just shut it down straight away. There's no sort of big ideas. He's been in post since May 2021. I think I'm yet to hear a big, bold idea about the NHS from him.
Anna, what do you think of Ben's idea of maybe charging for some NHS services? Is that the sort of boldness you would like?
Well, I think that there's a few reasons why I think Humza probably shut it down. One, because it would be, I think, probably election killing if you said that you were going to start charging people to use the NHS. And also, I suppose you've got a point in that. Why should we not talk about it? Why was it just shut down so quickly? I think that was maybe also part of, the way that story came about. It's still unclear, but clearly it's not something that the government had ever thought would see the light of day. So yeah, props to the BBC for getting that one. But also I think generally on the point of the NHS and Humza, and I do kind of get what you mean in terms of, we haven't seen a really bold vision for the NHS. But in his defence, I would say I guess he is trying to sort things out after the pandemic and maybe trying to do that alongside relaunching some grand strategy might be too much. But then we have seen these national treatment centres as well. They're going to be delayed. So the things that they are trying to do aren't really working out either. So, yeah.
Hannah, the final contender, Ash Regan, the Edinburgh Eastern MSP, is she a serious contender or an also-ran?
Well, I think it's interesting. We've really not heard very much from Ash at all. I think she's maybe been quite clever in that she's launched her campaign in the Sunday Mail on Sunday. She gave some pretty direct answers to our political editor, John Ferguson, when he spoke to her about, what she would do about the gender reforms and the A9 and various other things. But then she's just been pretty quiet and we've not really seen much directly from her. I think that's worked to her advantage because she's seen probably the weaknesses in Humza's campaign. She's obviously seen the weaknesses in Kate Forbes' campaign, and so she can then prepare her answers for when she's going to be asked about these things. I do see that she's come under a bit of criticism for sort of inviting in members of or people who are close to the Alba party and potentially close to Alex Salmond previously, that she is inviting them into her campaign. So I think Kirk Torrance, who is involved in the Alba party, is kind of leading her campaign. And he was sort of condemning Nicola Sturgeon during the whole Alex Salmond debacle, saying that Nicola Sturgeon was kind of up to her eyes and sort of covering up what was really going on. So she's been asked about that today, and I think she didn't really answer the question from what I could see briefly on Twitter. She seems to have kind of run away from the person asking it, which is never a good option. So I think while she might have started as a very outside candidate, I think because so many people have dropped out, because Kate Forbes has apparently sort of set her campaign on fire, she might actually do better than even she thought at the beginning, because people are really looking for someone who gives them another option that's maybe not Humza. But we need to see what she's got to say, and I think she really does need to do like a series of press conferences or interviews and be questioned fully on what her policies are.
Ben, one of the things that she has said, having read the Sunday Mail interview, is that she would effectively kill the reform of the GRA, that bill that MSPs passed before Christmas. The Scottish Secretary blocked it, and Nicola Sturgeon said that she would want to try and challenge that in court, but Ash Regan is saying that she doesn't agree with the bill and it's effectively dead if she becomes First Minister. Do you think that the GRR bill will be a big issue for SNP members in this contest?
I don't think it's as big as it might have been. Again, we don't know much about the makeup of the SNP membership, but my understanding is that a lot of members, possibly thousands, have already left in protest at the GRR. So there's a huge constituency out there who this would have been their number one issue. They've left the party, and at that extraordinary NEC meeting the day after Nicola Sturgeon resigned last week, it was decided that they wouldn't be allowed to rejoin and take part in the membership contest. So that, in effect, that pretty much probably at the time seemed like it killed Ash Regan's campaign. Perhaps the difficulties Kate Forbes has been having have allowed her back in. But yeah, I think the GRR is going to be a big part of it. Humza's obviously said he'll continue the legal challenge against the Section 35, which kind of fits in with him being the continuity candidate who look to keep the Scottish government on the same path that it's been on, push for the GRR bill to get royal assent, look to continue the pact with the Greens, and really just continue on the course that Nicola Sturgeon has set the party on. So in that respect, the gender reforms become almost a kind of totem of who's got control of the party. Is it the Sturgeon wing in the form of Humza Yousaf, or is it the opposition who are going to maybe press reset and look at taking the party in a different direction? And almost certainly it would mean the end of the Butte House agreement and the deal with the Greens, and going back to what Express readers would think. I think they'll be delighted to see the Greens out of government. Either Kate Forbes or Ash Regan can do that either deliberately or by default. I think people will be, my readers will be very pleased at that.
Just a final issue on this contest. There is a school of thought that the Kate Forbes row hasn't just damaged her, but it's damaged the party more generally. There's a sense that the SNP's worked hard to have a reputation of being a progressive centre-left party, and this kind of eats away at that. Then, in terms of the sort of chaos of the last few days and the divisions that are about to emerge in the contest, which political party do you think benefits most from that in terms of the opposition?
In terms of the opposition, Probably Scottish Labour. I mean, the Tories benefit because they, they'll just be delighted to see the SNP in such disarray. But ultimately, if we're saying that the SNP are going to lose some of these more sort of progressive, socially liberal supporters, they're not going to go to the Tories. They're going to go to Scottish Labour, I think. A few weeks ago, I would have said that Scottish Labour's position on GRR and whipping the MSPs was a big own goal. It may turn out to have been a masterstroke because they could mop up disgruntled SNP supporters who fear that the SNP is going to go in a more sort of socially conservative direction. Obviously, Labour seem to be in something of a revival mode at the moment. Their biggest concern among Express readers, if you like, would probably be the fact that they're viewed as kind of a little bit wobbly on the union. Keir Starmer's very keen to push the line that there'll be no deals with the SNP. But actually, it almost looks as though independence is so far off the agenda now that won't matter quite as much. So to answer your question, I think Labour benefit the most. Electoral.
Hannah, do you agree? Do you think there's opportunities here for Labour?
Yeah, absolutely. We can already see in the polling that Labour is on the rise, both in Scotland and in England. I think, potentially we're going to see them become more popular in Scotland because of the chaos of the SNP, the same way as the chaos of the Tories has seen like huge amounts of people kind of move towards Labour. I don't think, unfortunately, for Keir Starmer and Anas Sarwar, we can say that it's because they've actually done something to change people's views. I think it's more kind of disillusionment with other parties that's driving people towards Labour. It's kind of seen as, well, what's the other option, because if you vote for the Tories, you're not likely to swing to the SNP, and if you vote for the SNP, you're not likely to swing to the Tories. So Labour's kind of somewhere in the middle that you can kind of reconcile with, I suppose. The other party that I think could benefit is actually the Greens, depending on obviously who wins the contest. But if you've got those kind of people who are very, left-leaning, liberal, etc., looking for where to put their vote, and they're not necessarily leaning towards Labour, I think they could go to the Greens, actually. For example, somebody like Kate Forbes became First Minister. So it's difficult to tell, but I would say the Greens and Labour, definitely.
Thanks for that. Enough of this serious chat. Let's move on to a wee feature called Tweet of the Week. I'm hoping that we can maybe pull up Ben's tweet first, if that's possible. Yeah, here we go. I'm not sure how I would describe Brian Spanner. A robust commentator on Twitter. Would that be a fair description?
I think that's a very fair description. He's certainly, he's been around for years. I'm sure anyone who's been on Scottish Twitter is familiar with Brian Spanner. I've particularly enjoyed some of his kind of takes on the questions around religion this week. Father Ted has appeared a few times. A close second was a scene from Father Ted where he said he'd enjoyed being Kate Forbes' social media manager, and he's got Ted pointing to a blackboard saying that would be an ecumenical matter. But I think this one just took it. Not the greatest use of Photoshop, and perhaps some of the other disciples could have had SNP ministers' heads put on them. But either way, it made me laugh when I saw it.
I think it was fully in keeping with Brian Spanner's output, that tweet. That's what I would say about it. Whoever he or she is, I don't know.
Or they.
Or they. Or
Where are they?
Hannah, how about you? What's your tweet of the week?
My tweet of the week is just very kind of, I suppose, humorous on a very basic level, but I'm quite enjoying Nicola Sturgeon making these sort of jokes about who she's going to endorse to be her successor. So I think the day after she announced she was resigning, she had tweeted something about Andy Murray, because we all know that she loves Andy Murray. She's had a bit of a joke with Andy Murray about him taking over, and now Gary, the tank commander, has made some video saying that he wants to succeed Nicola Sturgeon. And, on a more, I suppose, not really serious, but I guess on a more serious note, it is actually just quite nice to see Nicola Sturgeon being a bit more of a human being and less of a political robot, if I'm allowed to say that.
Reading your tweet, I think I've come up with a way just to bring the country together. Unionists, nationalists, folk on the left, folk on the right. Why don't we just ensure that Andy Murray becomes the next First Minister?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, would Express readers go for that?
I mean, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility. He is considering a career in politics. He's, he's been very involved in kind of women's rights on the tour. We know he intervened in the original independence referendum with his famous early morning tweet again.
I forgot about that. Yes, he did do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Andy for FM. Just finally, let's do a good week, bad week. Hannah, who's had a good week and who's had a bad week?
Well, good week, I will say probably Ash Regan's had a pretty good week, because she's not really said very much and she's just watched her competitors getting hauled over the coals. And bad week, I mean, obviously we can say Kate Forbes has had an absolutely honking week, to be honest, but I also think Jenny Gilruth has had a really bad week. Just talking about A9, stuff to do with A9, she's, that's kind of exploded as well, and she's not really come across very well. So if we're looking for someone who's not Kate Forbes, I would say Jenny Gilruth has had a pretty bad week.
Ben, who's looking at the stars? Who's rolling around in the gutter?
I think Rishi Sunak's had a good week. Again, despite not doing anything, he's probably the first Prime Minister since Blair who hasn't got to worry about an imminent threat of the union breaking up. I mean, independence looks further away than ever, and he's not to do anything. He's just stood back and watched as the SNP have self-combusted. Supreme Court, GRR, Isla Bryson, all these things have happened on his watch, and it brings to mind the old adage about lucky generals, and perhaps Rishi Sunak. Certainly when it comes to Scotland and the future of the UK, is going to be lucky. As far as bad weeks go, again, avoiding the obvious, I don't think it's been a particularly good week for Nicola Sturgeon. It's been nice to. It's been notable that she seems a lot more relaxed. She was sort of chuckling during an interview the other day. She's going up to Aberdeen to do a book festival with Val McDermid at the weekend. And while she might think that this is all very amusing, I mean, essentially it's her lack of strategic planning that has left her party and the independence movement in such dire straits. So I'm really not sure what she's got to chuckle and laugh about. I think she's had a terrible week.
Well, look, I think that brings to a close our first episode of Planet Holyrood. Thanks, Hannah. Thanks, Ben. I think that our musings will be available on a range of social media platforms like YouTube and Facebook. And I hope to see you again this time next week. So thanks very much. Bye.
It's important we look at the facts. Why? Why?
Douglas Ross is sounding pretty scared.
I believe in independence.
And he clapped like a seal.